All right, welcome everyone. This is Norman Sandridge coming to you live from Washington, D.C. I've got my two students here, Fortune and Pete, also coming to you from D.C. We've got Vicky Győri, our featured host for tonight, coming to us from London, England. Abe Traugh coming to you from Atlanta. Oh, wait 1 second. I need to. And finally, Ulrike is back. Ulrike, we found you. Ulrike coming to us from Evergreen State in Washington State. This is truly an international and global edition of Money Talks, now our 10th module here in Sinoikasis Ancient Leadership. We have an awesome lineup for you tonight. Vicky is going to give a brief introduction in just a moment on Augustan coinage. Then I'm going to talk about what I think is a very timely, maybe the last time we'll have a chance to talk about political ads for this season. The presidential campaign will be over. We're going to talk about political ads and their relationship to ancient coinage. Then Abe Traugh, one of the Sinoikasis online students with Lindsay Sampson's cohort, is going to interview Vicky on the exciting life of a numismatist. Then Ulrike Krotscheck is going to talk to us about Roman arches and triumphal processions and how they're represented and compare them with coins. And then Vicky is going to give us the coin side of that. And finally, we're going to come back to Fortune, myself, and Pete, and we're going to talk about the hypothetical of how would you create an ideal world currency. Remember, the title of our album for this course is Beyond the Boundaries of Fantasia. So we want to be thinking into the future. What would be an ideal currency for the world to embrace? So thank you all for joining us tonight. We look forward to an awesome discussion in Slack chat. And so without further ado, we're going to hear now from Vicky Győri, all the way from London. Welcome, Vicky, and please introduce your module, your brainchild, your Athena, if you will.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody, and greetings from London. I will give you just a little bit of a background about my module and the significance of Augustan coinage. So some things to take away from the module and about the age of Augustus. So the study of Augustan coinage is significant because his coins are much more subtle and nuanced than what is usually stated. So the Octavianic Kaiser DVF and M. Kaiser coin series of 32 to 27 BC, which most of you have probably looked at already, revealed to us that there was no great change after Actium. So, you know, everybody says that either after 31 or 27 BC, this is the start of the Roman Principate, the divide between the Republic and the Empire. But these coins should be characterized in a Hellenistic monarchic tradition of the late Republic. And it is true from circa 19 BC to 16 BC that honorific coin types depicting honors voted or requests granted to Augustus by the Senate and the people of Rome, are introduced into the inventory of Roman numismatic typology. These types demonstrate a move towards monarchic typology. From 15 BC to AD 14, there is indeed a corresponding increase in coin types displaying members of the Augustan family that were minted. You have probably looked at some provincial coins, and there are more coin types portraying Augustan family members of the imperial family on provincial coins in much greater bulk and earlier than mainstream coins. I don't like to use the word imperial because this is misleading. So I would like to have you talk about Roman coins, especially in the period of the Augustan age. I mean, later on, of course, you know, you get to imperial coins, but particularly in this period, I would like to rather use the word mainstream coins and then provincial coins. So going back to this, members of the imperial family appear in much greater bulk and earlier on provincial coins than they do in mainstream coins. And So, however, the Tiberian bronzes issued at Lugdunum and Rome from AD 9 to 14 present an ambiguity. Tiberius is displayed in the style of a republican triumphator. I suggest that a specific date or specific time period that would mark a beginning for the Principate cannot be identified in the Octavianic Augustan coinage. There is at times a step forward that reveals some new typological entry, but then there is a return to republican elements, such as is seen with these Tiberian obverse portraits during Augustus's lifetime. So, thus, Augustan coinage can deeply contribute to our understanding of the nature and chronology of the formation of the Roman Principate. And so I think that this is a good summary of what we have been looking at throughout this module. And back to you, Norman.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Vicky. So I'm going to do a kind of a brief modern tie-in now before Abe starts his interview with Vicky on the life of the numismatist. It occurred to me as we were talking about coins, or I tried to think of kind of what are the modern parallels to ancient coins. No longer do our leaders put their faces on money while they're alive, although, you know, maybe we could see that sometime in the future. In the ancient world, leaders put their faces on money and gave the money to the people. In the modern world, we give money to politicians so that they can put their faces and portraits on television. And so I thought it would be interesting to explore just a few ways in which a leader, I'm going to focus on Hillary Clinton tonight, but you could do it for anyone, in which a leader tries to brand himself or herself using a political ad. And these remind me of coins in the sense that they're highly imagistic. Of course, they use sound and video as well as images. They tend to be very concise, and they tend to focus on just a couple of attributes of the given leader. So if you give me just 1 second, I'm going to pull up the first video I want to look at. These are just 30-second clips. As I said, this will be a very short segment. This is a 30-second clip of an ad that Hillary Clinton ran back in 2008 when she was in the Democratic primaries with Barack Obama, and it's called her Presence ad. Not to be confused with the Led Zeppelin album called Presence, but P-R-E-S-E-N-T-S, Presence, where Hillary Clinton is portrayed almost as a goddess of bounty or a goddess of good fortune, where she is doling out presents that she sees the government capable of giving to the people. And so she's playing kind of a mother figure at Christmas time who would wrap the presents for the children and pass them out. And I think this is a very interesting ad because she's clearly exploring, you know, what it would mean to be a feminine leader. I suspect many people may have found it patronizing. So let me play this now for you, just a 30-second clip. And I also posted them in the Slack chat. Oh, here, let me start it over. There we go. So there's universal health care, alternative energy.
Where did I put universal pre-K? Okay. Ah, there it is.
All right, so even the there's kind of a religious overtone there, certainly emphasizing her Christian faith. Okay, let me bring up the second one here. This is probably one of Hillary Clinton's more famous ads, again going back to 2008, her 3 a.m. White House ad, where the idea is the president is one of these eternally vigilant figures. We haven't talked about this so much in our course so far, but vigilance or attentiveness was certainly a trait that many leaders, ancient leaders, tried to cultivate, that was often praised and celebrated. If you see depictions of the Emperor Augustus, maybe Vicky can speak to this later on, the Emperor Augustus, he often has lines across his forehead that are meant to signify his concern or his thoughtfulness. And so here is Hillary Clinton's version of that. It's her experience and her attentiveness that is being celebrated here.
That your children are safe and asleep, but There's a phone in the White House and it's ringing. Something's happening in the world. Don't we decide who answers that call? Whether it's someone who already knows the world's leaders, knows the military, someone tested and ready to lead in a dangerous world. It's 3 a.m. and your children are safe and asleep. Who do you want answering the phone?
I'm Hillary Clinton, and I approve this message.
All right. There, and again, Hillary Clinton was trying to contrast her longtime experience in politics with that of Barack Obama. Of course, in this election cycle, her experience has been somewhat contested by Donald Trump, who refers to it often as bad experience. Okay, for this final ad, I like this one perhaps the best because it's building on what is perhaps the most famous of all the political ads, you know, in the late 20th and early 21st century. And that, of course, is the Daisy ad from 1964 that Lyndon Johnson ran, where a little girl was pulling petals off a daisy, and it blended into a countdown for a nuclear holocaust. And the implication was, this was Lyndon Johnson making the argument that his opponent, Barry Goldwater, the Republican candidate, was not psychologically stable enough to be the president. So he ran the ad. But Hillary now has come full circle with this recent ad. Some of you may know that she was actually for Barry Goldwater back in 1964, a Republican. She identified herself as a Goldwater girl. I think she was all of 16 or 17 at the time. But now she has the girl, the woman who played the girl, or who was the girl back in this ad, speaking on Hillary's behalf to call into question Donald Trump's capacity to wage nuclear warfare. Again, this is a question of experience and temperament.
This was me in 1964. I was in the Daisy ad, which was a political commercial. The fear of nuclear war that we had as children, I never thought our children would ever have to deal with that again. And to see that coming forward in this election is really scary.
A foreign policy expert went to advise Donald Trump, and 3 times he asked about the use of nuclear weapons. If we have them, why can't we use them?
I want to be unpredictable. Wouldn't you rather, in a certain sense, have Japan have nuclear weapons?
Saudi Arabia?
We have weapons. Saudi Arabia, absolutely.
What safeguards are there to stop any president who may not be stable from launching a nuclear attack?
The commander-in-chief is the commander-in-chief.
Bomb the shit out of them.
Vote for Hillary Clinton on November 8th. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
All right. So that concludes my presentation. Vicky is actually going to circle back with us at the end of the hour and talk about ways in which these ads, these aspects of leadership that are highlighted in these ads, are actually very ancient, and we can find some of them even on ancient coinage. And by the way, I don't know if anybody saw the ads for Star Wars on those videos, but if you're looking for something to get me for Christmas, Star Wars gifts are always welcome. So now, without further ado, I'm going to kick it to my good friend Abe Traugh and to Vicky Győri. Abe is going to now interview Vicky on the life of the numismatist, and I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint presentation for them when Vicky cues me, so you can reference that as well. All right, Abe and Vicky, are you there?
Yep.
Great.
Welcome to you both. All right, here is Abe. Take it away.
That was a tough act to follow, but I'll try. Again, my name is Abe Traugh. I'm one of the online students. Dr. Sandridge approached me a short while ago and asked if I would be willing to interview Dr. Győri about numismatics, and I quickly jumped on it because if any of you all have seen her present so far, it's a lot of information that comes across, but the passion with which she brings it across is evident. Really entices me,
Thank you.
and hopefully others, to want to learn more about numismatics, what it means, what the coins bring to the picture of what we're looking at. I think a lot of the students that I've talked to individually at this point sometimes have a problem understanding how the coins fit with the module, fit with the text, fit with the leadership course that we're taking. So I wanted to ask a few questions directly to Vicky, so she could tell us about what it is that brings these three subjects together. So I'm going to jump right in with a few questions. I thought it was important right off the bat. Why, Dr. Győri, is it important to study numismatics?
Well, numismatics tells us so much about the culture, a society, a reign of an emperor or a city, and so it's sort of a microcosm in a way. And looking at Augustan coinage, just because that's what we've been talking about in this module. So you can pull up the PowerPoint. So we can learn about a particular historical event through a coin, and for one is an act of tyranny, which is Brutus's coin, which is a very famous coin that shows Epilus between the two daggers, and actually has the legend Edmar, so Eyes of March, and it can show a civic act and can even redate an event. So figure 2, which shows the legislatura coin type of Octavian, redates the so-called first settlement of 27 BC to 28 BC, because it shows on the coin through the legend that it is 28. And also militaristic events. So Aegypto Capta coin, which has Egypt being conquered, that was minted in 28, and religious acts, which is figure 4. That has a reference to the Lude Saculares, or the secular games that were celebrated in 17 BC. Coins can tell us about art history. So, the late Roman Republicans that we've been looking at the figures, as Sulla, Caesar, Antony, Octavian, were all representing themselves as Hellenistic monarchs, and we can see this through the coins. And finally, economic history. Let's look at the debasement of coinage in the 3rd century AD. That tells us a lot about the political instability, the military and internal instability that was going on for a period of 50 years. And there were more than 25 interim emperors. So I would say numismatics is important for history, for art history, economics, and then within that, religion and all these other cultural factors. And so, I always think that a picture does contain 1,000 words, and coins is a proof of that.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. So, building off of what you just said, why is it that you chose to go into this field, to teach this field?
Well, I started numismatics when I was an undergraduate at Oberlin, when I was asked to catalog Greek and Roman coins in the Allen Art Museum. And if any of you have been there, you should go see the collection. And I became really fascinated by what coins can tell us, and how that even to this day, nobody really pays attention to them. It's always an afterthought, the discipline of numismatics, sort of the underdog. And so I thought that they should be brought into the spotlight, and that has turned into, my sort of life's work, if you like. My PhD was on Augustan coinage and ongoing research on coinage of Augustus. So I would like, if there's one thing that people will take away from this module, is that they should start asking, what is the numismatic evidence? And you will be more surprised than not that you can always find something, and there is a coin for every occasion.
Interesting. I remind our presenters to mute if you're not speaking, please. Let's get a little bit deeper. What is it about numismatics that adds to the actual modules that we are learning right now? Are there specific details that we can learn from the coins themselves that solidify what we're learning, that add to that picture?
Well, I mean, this is a course on leadership, and coins show, leaders, how their reigns have been represented, how they are individually represented, how their reigns are represented, how they justify their reigns, and we also get information. So we get, sort of this snapshot, if you like, of I'm just using Roman emperors for now, Roman emperor's reign, and so you get their achievements, other events such as battles, what was going on, their policies, so that, if you like, their ideological program. I don't want to use the word propaganda, and you also get who they who they were influenced by. So let's take Augustus. So he legitimized his rule, right, by Divus Julius, so by Julius Caesar. And you see,
you guys have 2 minutes. 2 minutes, by the way. I just want to let you know. Make sure you get all your questions out.
So Julius Caesar, that he was he was a Divi Filius, a son of a god, and also he emulated Numa. So there are coins that portray Augustus and Numa, because Augustus, as you know, wanted to be like Romulus, the first king of Rome, the warrior king, and Numa, who was the priestly king, the second king of Rome, Numa Pompilius. So there are coins that portray this. So this is why you get this sort of cross-cultural, and he also, of course, Octavian wanted to portray himself like Alexander the Great, and you do get this Hellenistic monarchic tradition. So you get a wide range of imagery that you can find on coins. That this is sort of but with this module with Augustus, you pick up a lot from the module that we had on spirits of the material world. So there's a lot of
1
interaction.
Minute. Okay, so I'm going to rapid fire do some questions here, answer them quickly.
Okay.
Dr. Sandridge mentioned earlier that there was almost a media portion of the coins. I had read when I was studying that there were citizenry that actually learned of a new emperor by getting the coin itself. They hadn't heard of it until that point. How informational was accuracy? Was currency?
Well, I mean, this was your form of Instagram, or Facebook, Twitter, whatever, what have you, of social media we have today. So you have also because of the wide range. So if you were somewhere far away, let's say, and you weren't in Rome, you would find out about different battles that were won, different other events, and they were also sort of these events were stressed by legends. So the legends were explanatory, stressing the image. So there was no way you could misinterpret an image, and the legends also became a sort of CV, if you like, a resume of the emperor with all the titles that were given to a particular leader, and then the sort of res gesta, their achievements and the reverse. So you can look at it that way as well. So coins were always, a medium of commemoration and information, both together.
And one last question, because I know the time dictator is going to cut us off here. I thought it was really.
Don't worry. I will write these all up and post them on site with all the other ones that you asked me. I will write them up and put them on Slack.
The last question, I just thought it was very interesting. Has there ever been a coin that has gone against what history has told us?
Well, I will go back to this when I will talk about architecture and coins. One of my favorite coins is the Temple of Mars Ultor, which maybe you've seen in my module, and I mentioned this a lot. It's one of my favorite coins, and there's some discrepancy between the temple that is shown on these coins and the temple that Cassius Dio talks about in Roman History 54.8.3, and I will get back to this in the next segment. But as you were saying, a numismatic commentary and looking at coins and texts is very interesting. And one of there should be more numismatic commentaries, in my opinion. There's one actually on res gesta, and one I would find really interesting is to do a commentary on Dio, on Cassius Dio. So they can coins can fill in lots of gaps to literary texts as well as archaeological, obviously.
All right, very good. Time Tyrant says we have to move on, but I do have one question for you, Vicky, from the Slack chat. Olivia asks, What about negative portrayals of leaders on coins? And were there ever opportunities to see the nastier side of a leader? Presumably a leader himself or herself would not put their nasty attributes, but would someone ever mint the negative attributes of another leader on a coin?
That's a very good question, and what we've been talking about with the ads, and what I will get to in a final segment.
Great. Why don't we leave it there as a teaser?
Just one thing. There's we can also talk about damnatio memoria. So, for instance, Nero's coins were sometimes slashed after his death, and there's a famous passage that people did look at the obverse portraits of a coin, and there's a famous passage of Arian that says, is it a coin of Trajan, keep it. If it's a coin of Nero, chuck it. So that's just on this. People did look at who was on the coin. This is and there are many other examples as well.
Thank you so much, Vicky, and thank you so much, Abe, for conducting the
interview. I will put up the other questions as well.
Excellent.
There were a few more in the interview.
Okay, we're going to transition now to Ulrike, who is going to talk to us about arches and Roman triumphal processions, the way they're depicted, and then Vicky's going to follow this up with coins. And Ulrike, I have your presentation whenever you're ready for me to pull it up.
I am ready for you to pull it up.
All right, welcome and hello. It looks like the sun is still out. This is crazy. It's what time is it, Vicky, where you are?
It's 11:20 at night.
I just want to put this in perspective. 11:20 at night. And Ulrike, where are you?
I'm in Washington State.
Yeah.
It's 4:30 and the sun is shining brightly.
Wow.
It's raining here in London.
So Vicky, are you getting some sunlight vicariously with Ulrike?
Yeah, because it's even raining. It was raining earlier today.
Oh, wonderful. All right, here comes the sun. All right, I'm going to share. Here's your presentation, Ulrike.
Okay. How much time do I have, Norman?
You have 8 minutes.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Can we see the presentation? Can you highlight it so that it appears on your screen? Sorry, that it appears on the main screen.
Are you seeing it? Oh, wait. Let me see. Oh, I see. How's that?
No, I see Vicky. Oh, I need to click on it. Okay. I think. All right. So I'm going to talk about how it is that leaders portray themselves on one particular type of architecture, the Roman arch. Romans erected triumphal arches for their military victories. And a triumph, you may all know, is a procession, a victory procession that followed a really significant military victory. It was generally voted on by the Senate in order to honor a particular general. And for here on the slide, you can see a book that's on the Roman triumph, but I'm going to talk about a monument that's associated with the triumph, and that's the triumphal arch, or the Arcus Triumphalis, as you see here. So here you see in Peck's Harper's Dictionary of Classical Antiquities that these arches are peculiar to the Romans. They were detached structures. They usually were over a street or in town, so they were meant to be passed through. And then they were decorated with trophies and with reliefs and inscriptions honoring the person who's being commemorated by these arches. And sometimes they had big bronze chariots or statues on top as well. And we know of many more of them than actually exist now, because they were often destroyed. For example, if you will move on. Oh, oops, there we go. I was going to talk about the different architectural elements. And so what's unique about them is that there are round arches between 1 and 3. So a triumphal arch can just be one single arch. And then a rectangular entablature, also called an attic, that's above those arches, and that's where the decorations is. Okay. The Harper's Dictionary says that, if you'll move on, Norman, that they were peculiar to the Romans, but in fact we know of large gate-like structures, not entirely the same, such as this one at Hattusha from the 2nd millennium BC. And also the Roman triumphal arch was imitated up until really the previous century, maybe still. This is the Arc de Triomphe, and that was built in Paris in 1806. So if we'll move on, some of the lost arches that we know about, because Tacitus talks about it, Nero commemorated an arch, and of course Nero is known as the emperor who fiddled while Rome burned, etc., even though that's not entirely accurate. But we don't have his arch anymore. In fact, Vicky is going to talk about how it is that we know that it did actually exist in addition to Tacitus's Annales. And because of the damnatio memoriae, look it up, that Nero suffered after his death, it was probably destroyed purposefully, as were almost all of his sculptures. Okay.
You're doing great on time, by the way, Ulrike. You have 4 more minutes.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Take your time.
Okay, great. So we'll look at the Arch of Constantine. So this is one of the best preserved ones. It's in Rome. It was dedicated in 315 for Constantine, the emperor, Constantine's victory over Maxentius in 312, and also for the 10-year anniversary of his reign. So the Emperor Constantine, who is sometimes called the first Christian emperor of the Roman Empire, you can see he reigned fairly late, much later than Augustus and some of the other ones that we have been talking about so far. He instituted a giant building program all over the empire, and the Roman Senate decreed this arch to be built for him in Rome, along with many, many other monuments. This is a very well-preserved arch. It makes use of different colored stone that you can kind of see in this picture. And there are some other peculiarities on it that I'm going to talk about that say a lot, I think, about what Constantine's, or the Senate's, I suppose, what their message was or could have been with this arch. Okay, so let's move on. So the inscription that's in the center entablature of the attic up there reads, "To the Emperor Caesar Flavius Constantinus, the greatest, pious, blessed Augustus, because he inspired by the divine." This is a very a controversial translation, I believe. "By the greatness of his mind, has delivered the state from the tyrant and all of his followers at the same time," and so on and so on. The Senate and the people of Rome have dedicated this arch, decorated with triumphs. And so the arch itself is decorated with triumphs. But the thing is, the triumphs that the arch is decorated with, so there are depictions of triumphs, of course, these triumphs don't actually all belong to Constantine. So if we'll move on, in fact, what the architects and builders did is they took pieces of other monuments, monuments of Trajan, monuments of Hadrian, monuments of Marcus Aurelius. So emperors who were even at that time famous for having been very good emperors. They took aspects of their monuments, from different types of monuments too. These don't all come from other arches. Some of them are from Fora and so on. So, and they incorporated them into the arch. And so if you're an art historian, you can tell stylistically that these aren't from the same period because the sculptures look different. And because sculptural style changes over time, just like clothing style changes over time. In some of the panels, and I don't have pictures of all of them, unfortunately, in the slideshow, you can see that the faces of the emperors themselves, of the previous emperors, particularly of Hadrian and Marcus Aurelius, so in those around Tondi, right there, T-O-N-D-I, that's the technical term for those round panels. Hadrian's face has been changed sculpturally to look more like Trajan. And so, yes, I apologize, I don't actually have a slide of those panels, but you should certainly look them up. And if you can imagine—
About 1 more minute, Ulrike.
Okay, thanks, Norman.
No problem.
I guess I slowed down significantly. If you can
the
imagine—
devil is in the details.
The devil is in the details. It was not hard to do that because Hadrian was always depicted as having a beard, and Trajan did not. So essentially, if you took off the beard of Trajan, you could make, Constantine out of it. Okay, and then if we'll move on. In the friezes are the ones that definitely relate to Constantine's reign. And there you can say, see at the top, you can see the procession into Rome, and he is at the left in a chariot. Right below that, he is addressing the Roman people. Constantine is seated in the center. And then at the bottom, he is giving out handouts or money to people. And I think so he's displaying himself as someone who is a leader, but also very generous to the people. So he conquers, but then he gives back. You may notice that Constantine doesn't have a head in any of these friezes. And that's something that you should think about, why that might be, that today in this arch in Rome, Constantine no longer has a face. So just to wrap up, there are some conflicting theories as to why it was that Constantine used, or the builders of this arch used, this other material. And one theory is that they were trying to evoke those previous great emperors and sort of co-opt them to help bolster Trajan's reputation. And the other theory is that maybe they just didn't have enough time because it was dedicated so quickly in just 3 years. And so they just took whatever they could find and stuck it where it fit. And that's something that you can discuss.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Ulrike.
Thank you.
And now, if you would, if you can, check out the Slack and see what conversations are going. And we're going to turn it back over to Vicky now to talk about comparisons with coins here. So,
do you have the PowerPoint up for me?
I do. I'll bring it up right now.
Thank you so much for that, Ulrike. That was brilliant. Thank you so much again for doing that. Should I start or should I wait until then? Okay, there we go. So, Architectura Numismatica, or architecture on coins. Numismatic portrayals of monuments on Roman coinage can be divided into 3 categories: accurate portrayals of existent monuments, imagined representations of monuments not yet existent, and symbolic representations of monuments. In a seminal study on Architectura Numismatica, Andrew Burnett, and I will give you the reference for this on Slack. Andrew Burnett writes that, and this is, I'm going to quote this, this is very important. Quote, "The die engraver was not primarily concerned to depict a particular monument. His primary concern was instead to refer to a particular event or idea that might also happen to be commemorated in a particular monument, rather than to depict the monument itself." He goes on to say that, quote, "It is the idea rather than the actual structure that is the objective of the die engraver." And the numismatic depictions of monuments can simply be interpretations rather than reproductions of buildings. So with these citations in mind, I'd like to discuss my favorite example, and I mentioned this before. The Temple of Mars Ultor, seen on Augustan coins minted in Pergamum in Spain, circa 19 to 16 BC, and this is figures 1A to E. Look at the variety of images within the temple structures. Note, for instance, that the chariot eventually stood outside of the Forum of Augustus, so not in the Temple of Mars Ultor. In accordance with Cassius Dio, Roman History 54A3, and I give this passage on the PowerPoint, which says that a temple to Mars Ultor on the Capitol was decreed and carried out by Augustus. So that is on account of winning back Roman battle standards from Parthia in 20 BC, when he renewed his vow to build a temple of Mars Ultor. The first vow, as you recall, was unfulfilled, and this was given at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BC. So according to these coins, and the passage of Cassius Dio, most scholars and numismatists take these coins to represent a temporary temple of Mars Ultor that was built on the Capitol. We all know that the temple of Mars Ultor was built in the form of Augustus and opened and dedicated in 2 BC, and was a completely different structure. And if you've been to Rome, I'm sure you've seen it. However, as one scholar writes, quote, "Who can believe their farce of box and cocks, this romping in and out of cult statue and chariot, was ever really played out in a real temple," unquote. I suggest then that these Mars Ultor coins portray a symbolic representation of a temple, and the purpose of issuing these coins was to celebrate Augustus's Parthian success of 20 BC and to anticipate the idea of a temple of Mars Ultor. And I would say that the temple was originally meant to be built on the Capitol, but then there was a change of plan to build the temple in Augustus's new form. So now a couple of examples of monuments with leaders on coins. An example of a coin.
We have 4 more minutes, Vicky, just letting you know.
Oh, okay. That's fine. Now onto a couple examples of monuments with leaders on coins. An example of a coin with a projected design of a monument, and hence the leader represented, it is and hence the leader represented is a coin depicting the temple of Divus Julius, which is figure 2. Coins were minted in Africa in 36 BC that portray a tetrastyle temple within which is a veiled figure with a litus, the situs iulium, or the star of Julius Caesar, on the pediment, and a high podium without steps. Now you have to remember that the temple of Divus Julius was vowed in 42 BC, did not begin to be built until 31 BC, and was not dedicated until 29 BC. So this is an example of a projected design, something that is just an idea of a temple. So we cannot really say that this is the cult statue that was in the temple. So moving on to figures 3A to D, for Octavian and former Romanum following his Actian victory. Dio 51:19:1. As we've read in Dio 54:8:3, he also records a Parthian arch in the form Romanum. These varying accounts, as well as the Imp Caesar arch type, which is figure 3A, and so this was minted in circa 29 to 27 BC. And the Parthian arch reverses, reverse types minted circa 19 to 16 BC at Pergamum, Spain, and Rome. So this is figures 3B to D, are heavily debated in scholarship. There is certainly a difference between the so-called Actian arch on the Imp Caesar type, so figure 3A, and the Parthian arch reverse types, except for the Pergamum coin, which shows a single bay arch. So that is, the Actian arch is seen as a single bay arch, and the Parthian arch is seen as a triple bay arch. A majority of scholars
2 minutes, Vicky.
Does believe that the Parthian triple bay arch replaced the single bay arch. However, it seems more likely that the arch built for Actian was a triple bay arch, and that after 20 BC it was modified by the addition of sculptural decorations and inscriptions to commemorate the return of the standards from Parthia. The single bay arch depicted on the Imp Caesar reverse may be just a symbolic representation, showing just the central arch. So now onto the coins that depict the Arch of Nero, and these are particularly fascinating as we've just heard. These coins exemplify how numismatics can fill in so many gaps. You've been reading Tacitus Annals 13.41 and 15.8 and learned that there was a Neronian arch built on the slopes of the Capitoline for Corbolo's Parthian victory, but can't find any archaeological remains. So you are correct in that. This is the point where you should ask yourself, my grand question, is there any numismatic evidence? And indeed, there is. So this is figure 4. Coins minted in Lugdunum circa AD 65 show an arch with this Neronian arch, with Nero in a quadriga, accompanied by Pax and Victory on both sides, and 2 soldiers flanking the arch, so on the side arches, and on the side.
What? 1 minute, Vicky?
Yeah. So notice And also, and so in a sort of niche, you see a helmeted figure of Mars. And notice the detail in the engraving on this coin. And as we've been talking throughout the day, there is a left-facing portrait. And as a bonus, though not portraying a leader, I've put a Neronian reverse type depicting the Temple of Janus, which is figure 5. This is also a high-quality, detailed engraving, and you can see there's a left-facing portrait. And this is figure 5 is also an example of a rather accurate portrayal of a monument on a coin. Just read Procopius' History of Wars 5.2519. So that's sort of like a brief intro to our Architectura Numismatica.
Yay, thank you so much, Vicky. Everybody, I want to thank the time tyrant. Thanks everyone for keeping to time.
We have no choice, do we?
Well, no, I guess you don't. I have the control. Next time you can run the hangout and dominate as much as you want. So, okay, we're going to transition now.
We would be talking for hours.
We've got 2 more sections. Fortune and Pete, are you out there now? We're going to talk now about this idea of an ideal world currency, and then finally we're going to come back to Vicky and Ulrike and see if we have any questions in the chat that are coming up. But we want to turn to Fortune now. Fortune favors the brave. He also favors Senoikesis' ancient leadership. So just to set this up a little.
We have to mint a coin with this portrait.
You're right. Just to set this up for a second, in my class this week, we talked about how our reflections on the way coins work and their purpose. Could this sort of, what is the future of coinage? If we were ever going to mint a coin that, say, the whole world would use, what would we put on that? And Fortune, maybe you could start by summarizing some of the approaches we took in our class this week, and of course give your own reflections, but maybe take 2 minutes or so to talk about that, and then we'll hear from Pete.
Okay, briefly, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. Some of the ideas that some of the students in our class had, one of them was what they wanted the globe continents. Also, there was no person on it. They just wanted numbers in each language. They also wanted to build coin as shaped as a square in jade gold. Another idea was no words, just peace, doves, and a theme. Another one was just a Caribbean seal, sort of tropical. Another one was also having Maya Angelou, people like Gandhi, Mother Teresa, the dome, the fist, blessing, earth, and silver. Also, we had earth, devolution, gender neutral, and self we trust. We also had 2 hands, different shades, and a higher person we trust, globe, dove. And another one was goat coin, virtual. My idea was actually to have a 3D globe with all the nations on it. But as you looked at the bill, but if you just held the bill, you wouldn't be able to see it. But I feel like some of the strengths and weaknesses that some of these ideas had were being that, okay, one with Maya Angelou, Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, was that there's too many public figures in the world to have just a limited amount of public figures from one area in the world. If you're gonna have public figures, you would wanna have a way to basically represent every city, every country, every continent. And also evolution. Evolution may not win everybody's heart and mind. Also, finding symbols to represent the entire world totality will really be pushing it, because there's so many different symbols, so many different ideas you can create, and you have to basically create an idea which will be satisfactory to every single person in the world. With that specific idea, I feel like something that we'll have to actually take it step by step. Are we doing it by Are we doing it by public figures? Are we doing it by evolution? Are we doing it by public figures? Are we doing it by mottos? So I feel like that's something that we will have to actually take into consideration when creating or designing money.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that very thorough survey. Yeah, and so, you know, I actually happen to think this is a very important leadership question because, you know, when we look at ancient coins, of course, it's largely about the ancient leader promoting himself more often than herself, but the ancient leader promoting himself, and that's almost kind of by definition a divisive approach. It's saying, you know, I'm the better leader than someone else. It's always in a context of other leaders. But if we're thinking, and the reason I think this exercise is so important right now is next week we're going to be looking at the idea of global leadership. And so, you know, what does a global leader look like? What is global imagery? You know, how do you know, what's the language that the globe uses? Is it English? Is it some language we haven't invented yet? Will there ever be a common language that we can use to describe what all humans do? I know Abe is a big sci-fi fan, so he might actually be able to think of an example where in some sci-fi story they tried to create a common language and a common culture. But I wonder if anyone in the Slack chat or others have ideas about this, like what could we possibly use for an ideal currency? What would we put on an ideal currency?
I think Bono is the only thing that comes to mind.
Bono of YouTube.
I was just going to say one thing. One group of commemorative coins you can look at as an example, you know, for this is Olympic commemorative coinage, which does have this global theme. And if you've seen, I think I did post it in Slack a while ago. I wrote an article on comparing ancient Olympic coinage to modern Olympic commemorative coins, and you know there are a lot of themes like this, you know, the globalization and you know peace and you know and unity, all this. So I think that was really good, and the world, you know, if we would take on your the different coin types you've been suggesting, I think the world would be a better place. So we should get started.
Cool, thank you, Vicky. And I think we've lost Pete. I don't know. Oh, Pete, are you there?
I'm here.
Do you have some thoughts on this?
I do. As you know, I was not in class on Tuesday.
I'm trying to get your sound, Pete. Can you speak again?
Hello?
There we go. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. I was at an ROTC event on Tuesday, so I wasn't able to get my fellow classmates' views, but I do have my thoughts on global coinage.
Please share.
I think it's unique in that we would have to integrate like different narratives, different people groups from around the world. I think it would be like a unique challenge presented to like world leaders, in that it would cause people to have to explore, the stories of different countries and nations, and I think it would like kind of reorient, people from having like a nationalist perspective uniquely on, okay, what are our nation's unique interests, into, okay, what are the stories of our, our fellow humans on the other side of the globe. And so I think the challenge of saying, okay, what do we put on the face of a coin would be something like, I don't know if you've seen like the different religious symbols on a shirt, that was one thing that comes to mind. Another would be like the different contributions that are world events that have happened throughout history. You may see snapshots of different world events. And so I think the process is one of like definitely stepping outside of our paradigm. I think entering into the shoes of others. I think commerce reflects should reflect our values. And I think exploring the values of different societies would do a lot in the realm of human relations, in the realm of international relations, and just bridging the gap when it comes to just how we handle world issues and world problems.
Yeah, very nice, Pete. Thank you so much for that. And in some ways, it's good that you weren't in class on Tuesday, because you've brought a pretty unique perspective here to the discussion with your emphasis on education, and that coins are there to educate. I mean, I think about the state coins that have been introduced on U.S. quarters lately, and they're almost like tourist attraction notices saying like, here's why you should come to Tennessee and come to Nashville. And so there's a self-promotion element there, but also it sounds like your emphasis is really on education and sort of activating people to explore deeper what's going on. Very, very good. Well, thank you so much. We have about 4 minutes left. So I want to thank Pete and Fortune so much for hanging in there and being part of this discussion. I want to bring it back to Vicky finally, and Ulrike, if perhaps there are any loose ends that we might pick up from the Slack chat, or Vicky, if you want to come back to those Hillary Clinton ads and say anything about ancient coinage and those. So either one. Ulrike, how about Ulrike first? Were there any?
I didn't see anything that was specifically about the arches or the material culture. There's been a lot of discussion of art coins like social media, because they reach a lot of people, not necessarily. My pushback to that was, well, but the speed of travel is so slow. But then I think Olivia pointed out that they reach all these people, but then how do they translate to however it is that the people are using them is a question. Would everybody know that dude on the coin is the if you're like in farthest Britain living next to Hadrian's Wall or something. And there's been a lot of discussion on the what a global currency would look like, and there's a lot of discussion of, well, maybe thinking about universal currency in terms of value instead of image. What would an image be? Could we even agree on an image? Is that possible? So yeah, there's not necessarily been a concrete question, but there's been a lot of good discussion about that. Great.
I look forward to checking that out. All right, Vicky, finally to you. What do you want to say in the last 2 minutes here?
I just want to thank Fortune and Pete again for taking part, and I look forward to the actual designs, artistic designs of all these coins, and even the ones that are in the Slack. So if you pull up the PowerPoint, I'll just run through a couple of points.
All right, and remember, you have two minutes.
Some of these coins we looked at before, so I'll just explain what are the themes of these coins. So so there are 4 themes that you can see inside. Sort of the equivalent of the Hillary-Trump election is Antony and Octavian before Actium. So I thought of 4 themes. One is legitimacy. So as you know, Octavian claimed, and had, divine descent from Julius Caesar when Caesar became a god in 42, and so there are coins that advertise this, and Antony chose Dionysus as his divine patron, so you have figure 2 and also experience. So experience in the next group you have sort of very subtle differences where Octavian points out that he is pontifex and augur, so his 2 priestly titles, and on the reverse is a image of Antony where he is only augur. So again, the point goes to Octavian because he has 2 priestly titles. On the other hand, there are figures 4 and 5. Are coins of Antony, and Antony shows a litus, whereas Octavian is seen without the litus. So he's sort of omitting this fact that Octavian is augur. And you can notice that in figure 5, Antony shows Lepidus was the third member of the second triumvirate with his priestly titles, and Antony with his litus. So you can see that Octavian is sort of like the odd person out. And if we go on to the next slide. If we go on to figure 6, yes. So the other two themes, so we have legitimacy, experience, and achievements, and posterity. So on these coins, you have the legend Armenia Divicta, which is Armenia having been conquered. This refers to an Armenian victory of Antony in 34, which the hope is to overshadow his failure of his Parthian campaign in 36 BC. And you see a tiara, which is a symbol of Armenia, and figure 7 has the same with the legend Armenia Divicta. And a tiara, and the posterity, of course, you have the legend of Cleopatra on figure 6, where she is like where it says she is of Cleopatra, queen of kings, and her sons who are kings. So and in the same light, figure 7 shows Antony's son by Fulvia, Marcus Antonius Jr., who was eventually executed when Octavian captured Alexandria in 30 BC, along with Caesarion. So you can see that he also shows, you know, his family members.
We're out of time now. Vicky, do you want to? We can share your PowerPoint.
I just wanted to say in 5 seconds. You were talking about versatility, and if you go to the next slide, I will just mention that Octavian Augustus is a very good example for the versatility of a leader. And you were looking at some of these coins earlier today, and I thought, oh, here, he is a military commander, he is a triumphator, he is a world conqueror, a civil leader, and a priest. So a religious leader. So this sort of sums up Augustus in one word, you know, 5 images.
Very well done, yeah. No,
I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think versatility is one of the most interesting questions about, you know, questions of leadership. How do you hold all of these roles, and how do you do it in a way that is not seen as too kind of slimy or insincere or you know, unrealistic, like you're just posing or just pretending? Like, how do you pull off all of these roles sometimes when they're contradictory? So okay, Vicky, well, you have the last word. Do you want to send us off? Thank you so much for putting this together, putting the module together. It's really awesome.
My pleasure, my pleasure. And I would just like to say that I really enjoyed doing this module, and you know, sharing you know, different coins. And I would gladly like to talk to anybody that would like to ask a question, share something. So, you know, feel free to write me on Slack, on email, any form of media you want. You can even send the coin to me.
Awesome.
So thank you very much.